We're really, really privileged today. We've got in the room with us Chuck Proudfit. He's on this City Advanced Strategic Team. And Chuck is going to introduce to us Trina, who's a marketplace leader in the great city of Columbus. Go Buckeyes. And Trina, we welcome you to City Advanced Connect meeting. So Chuck, if you would just kind of introduce Trina to us, and then Trina, you're free to share your world and what you're up to.
All right, sounds great.
Yeah, Chuck, you're on mute.
Wow, I got muted. I was saying thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it. And I just have such a heart of gratitude for everyone with City Advanced Strategic Team. This is a group of people in the city movement space that have been so embracing of me and the idea of workplace as part of the whole place that we have to reach in the city. I appreciate that tremendously. And that's really the spirit that brought this conversation forward with Trina Ryan, who's become a wonderful friend and colleague a little bit north of me in Columbus, Ohio. So Cincinnati is on the southern edge of our state, bordering Kentucky, essentially, and Columbus is our state capital. For years, as some of you know, we've been building out the At Work on Purpose ministry in Cincinnati, and I've had so many connections in Columbus, but we haven't had enough critical mass to be able to foster a workplace community. And about a year and a half ago or so, we started to get traction for the very first time. There's a city movement in Columbus that goes by the name For Columbus. It had had an annual gathering where I had an opportunity to speak about workplace. And in that context, just for everybody to have a visual, the metaphor we were using visually was a stool with three legs, where the seat is the city movement, but the legs of the stool are congregations and nonprofits and workplace. And that's so often the architecture for city movements, but the workplace leg is often underdeveloped. So I was speaking to that in Columbus, and Trina had an opportunity to hear me speak. And she comes from Shaw Contract. So she is somebody who's in leadership in the day-to-day world of the marketplace, and she's become a key leader for us in Columbus. So Trina, first of all, I just want to welcome you to City Advanced Strategic Team. It's really wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Chuck. It's nice to be here. And just hearing Tom's background, just a brief moment, I don't even know, I'm not even worthy to be on this camera. I can't imagine, I can't believe what he's doing in this world. So anyways, I'm humbled, honored to be here, and hopefully we can have a great conversation together.
Trina, your story is a story that is true of so many working Christians out in the marketplace who have a heart for their city, but they don't know necessarily how to plug in to city stuff or city movement activity. And Trina, to open us up, would you talk a little bit about the journey that you and I went through, where you first heard about this and what it was that kind of sparked in your heart to pursue this?
Yeah, so I think what I'm going to do, I'm just going to let Jesus speak through me, right? I'm just going to share my heart, because this has been an amazing journey here. I would say starting in last 4 years. So what encouraged my heart, first and foremost, has been the Lord. And I say that with all sincerity, because in 2021, there was just this prompting and leading by the Spirit, and really bringing some highlight to the importance of a leader, a Christian leader in the workplace, right? And so as I reflect on this journey, first and foremost, I've learned that number one, God equips us before he calls us. So as he started to impress this upon my heart the last 4 years, I look back on this journey, and this is what has really been the pivotal moment of me, like, being all in. Like, when I read what Chuck's doing and what he's doing with At Work on Purpose, it was just an instant gravitation. I'm like, I want to be a part of this, because that is what Jesus has been speaking in my heart for these last several years. But when I say he equips us before he calls us, I didn't quite know what he was doing here when he placed me in leadership. And I say that sincerely. He placed me in this role of leadership at Shaw eight years ago. And I think what has been exciting about this journey is to see how God has really used me as a vessel to be courageous in my workplace for Jesus, not organically, right? And so as I've led this team, by being courageous about just sharing my faith and acknowledging Jesus's light or testimony, his testimonies within my life, what Jesus is doing in my life, and not be afraid to talk about that, I can tell you guys, this is what sparked it all. I've seen the fruit from my team. And I, you can lead up in an organization, you can lead down, you can lead across. So I'm not even talking about the direct team that I report to, but I'm also talking about my counterparts across brand or across divisions and leading up and leading down. So in all facets, we can bloom where God plants us, right? Each one of us, he has planted us on purpose. And I think what he has given me is this glimpse, not this glimpse, but this fruit that I have seen just be realized by just walking this faith out genuinely in my work every day. And not just going to church on Sunday and sitting there and worshiping the Lord and acknowledging him, but acknowledging him Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all through the week. And just simple things. And I think what has been encouraging to my heart is the reality is where he's planted us, we have great responsibility to steward that sphere of influence that we've been given by him. And I think if we are just a little bit more courageous out there in our workplaces and acknowledge and walk this work faith life out, we can see real fruit. And so I say all that because this is what Jesus has really imparted on my heart the last 4 years. I want to be an encouragement to other leaders across workplace in all aspects, business, government, education. I want to encourage them to be courageous. And I want to help them see that if we're courageous and we walk this faith life out at work, it's about the Great Commission, right? Go and make disciples of many nations. If we can effectively be the servant leaders that God is calling us to be in our workplace, then we are doing just that. And so that's first and foremost. Number one is my encouragement to get other leaders engaged in this, because Chuck and I, we've talked about this. There's 99% of Christians are in the workplace, right? So the harvest is plentiful. It's the biggest harvest before us that we have, and pastors can't do this alone. So that's what charges me. That's what gets me up every day and gets me charged and excited with this city movement, is getting more working Christians. I said this today, Chuck. I want to get more working Christians off the sidelines and in the game. Because if we can effectively get them off the sidelines and in the game, that's when we're going to see transformation.
Let me jump in here because I want to pull a few insights out from what you just shared. You're kind of exhibit A of some things I've been describing in various venues like City Advanced Strategic Team, but you're a real live example. So we have all of these talented workers, Christian workers with leadership gifts who are accustomed to the idea of organizing and running teams, being able to reach a sphere of influence, being able to organize and mobilize. And so they have all these business skills over here, and they have a huge heart for the Lord over there. But often we struggle as working Christians to figure out how to connect the dots. Often on Sunday in our local churches, we don't hear about work life as something that's spiritual. So this becomes one of our first arenas for spiritual formation. It's like, wow, I can be on mission to Monday, not just going to a job, but literally going on an adventure with the Lord. The second thing that I really saw happen in Trina's life was, Trina, that you began to connect dots, not just in your sphere of influence with workers around you and in your industry in the marketplace, but you started to see connection points in Columbus. In our case, came out of that was your leadership to help rally a team of working Christians like Trina that are beginning to build out a citywide community of working Christians that ultimately will cut across business, education, and government. In other words, these three big sectors of the workplace. And like you were saying, Trina, 99% of working Christians are not employed in local churches or nonprofits. We're employed in business, education, government. So if we can get active there, we have serious horsepower that we can bring to bear. Trina, my second question for you is, as we're starting to look across 2025 and then into the future in Columbus, what do you see as kind of the basic game plan, the key things that you'd like to see put in place that start to create infrastructure?
Yeah, well, we've talked a lot about this, Chuck, recently too, right? So I think the biggest thing that we would like to do is try to get these working Christians across those three sectors: business, government, education, right? Get these Christians, these leaders of these organizations in the room and start to join. There's a lot of good, even today, there are a lot of great kingdom influences happening in the workplace today. And in my little breakout session, I talked about OSU. Tom, you said OSU. We talked about the fact that the OSU, the prayer and the testimonies that they are verbalizing right on the campus, it has actually gotten national, maybe global attention. I don't know, certainly national attention. And so there are already great things happening inside of the education system, the business world. And what we want to do is bring all of that together. That's the goal for 2025, is to start to bring those organizations across the city into the room so we can start to have connectivity on a regular basis. We can start to build bridges between those, right? Start to recognize where do we have maybe overlap, but where do we have resources that we can deploy together, start educating, and then start deploying these resources that we are all learning about through each other's, skill sets, talents, and treasures, and start to deploy them in the offices, in the universities, in our classrooms. And so that's kind of one of the main goals in 2025, is to try to mobilize that effort. And then the second piece of that is, we've talked about, cities have great challenges today. I mean, this nation has great challenges, right? And all these cities have hundreds of challenges. We could all name them: affordable housing, mental health in the youth, sex trafficking. We could name them. So we also would like to identify, we cannot solve all problems. That's not what we're not going to be able to do that. But what we can do is identify one or two of these big city needs that the city has. And if we can effectively mobilize this workplace leg that Chuck and I are referencing, right? Come alongside of now the pastors and the nonprofit leaders, and build a strategy to go meet those needs in the city on that. If we have intentional focus on that need and go meet that need, that's when we're going to start to see spiritual flourishing in the city, vocational and educational. So that's really the two. Hopefully, did I miss anything, Chuck? That's, in my mind, the two overarching goals that we would like to accomplish this year.
I agree. Let me also, just for all of us, kind of putting on our strategy hats for a second here, because all of this is being built out as infrastructure in the context of an existing city movement. It's already up and running with a city identity and a lot of activity for congregations and nonprofits. So our first order of business here is creating a connected, networked community of working Christians across business, education, and government. And while it is true, and Trina's right, there are lots of examples, like the football team at Ohio State University that's made all the press and all that. There are lots of isolated things going on, but they're often not connected. So just that first effort, connecting working Christians in a collaborative network across business, education, and government, that's a major accomplishment. So that's a big thing we're working on. But then the second piece, and I just wanted to build briefly on what Trina is saying, because we're building a workplace leg alongside an existing city movement with congregations and nonprofits, we also have an opportunity to leverage those three legs in other creative ways. For example, imagine if we tapped leadership talent from our workplace leg in business, education, and government that could become advisory leadership for advisory boards or boards of directors for nonprofits in a city. And you're starting to bring some of the wisdom and talent from the marketplace into the leadership choices and the stewardship direction of not-for-profit organizations. Another example, imagine if we take the workplace leg and it sponsors an equipping, a citywide equipping on faith at work, how to bring your faith to life at work. And imagine if instead of it's happening as a workshop in one local church, we market it to all the churches in the city's network, and we hold it at a neutral location in the city. So all the churches feel comfortable sending their congregants. And in one fell swoop, we're educating Christians in faith at work across the entire city because we're leveraging the whole network of the city movement. So I want to, help you guys to dream with us a little bit about some of the things that are possible here. Now, one last question for you today, Trina. Lessons learned. We're pilot testing something, you and I. The hard truth, guys, is a preamble to this. There are city movements in our country that are driven through the workplace. And the workplace often chooses to bypass congregations and nonprofits. They find them too slow and frustrating. And what we're trying to do here is literally graft the workplace leg into a cohesive whole effort with congregations and nonprofits. So there is a lot to be learned in a pilot like this about how do you make it all work when it's not necessarily easy. There are lessons learned. And Trina, I'd love for you to share just one or two that you have observed and experienced as we've been leading this forward together.
Yeah, so in my opinion, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned so far. I mean, the reality, in all honesty, the reality is when you're doing kingdom work, I think we all know it's never going to be an easy task. It is a difficult journey. It's very hard. And I think maybe the two things that come to mind immediately is, number one, it always takes longer than what we think it's going to take. And so I say that because patience and perseverance is what I'm learning in this process. And then I'm also learning that God is sovereign and God's timing is perfect. So we have to be willing to be patient and persevere through that, because it is certainly taken much longer than what I think, Chuck, right, we had all hoped. So that's one of the big ones. Another, I have a couple actually. One of the things I'm thinking about, and I've thought about this a lot, is maybe progress over perfection. I think about it is hard to get unity and to get mobility when you've got, we've got three legs of the stool, if you will, that we're trying to get to all work together. But even just looking at this workplace leg, you've got different levels of leadership. You've got different personalities. It's not unlike just like a team, right? You're formulating a team. But I would say to you that I think one of the things that I want to encourage is maybe we just do progress instead of perfection, because I think it is limiting our ability to move forward at maybe a faster pace than what we could. I don't know if that makes sense. And then thirdly, I think the core team, Chuck, you and I have learned a lot about, it's the core team that surrounds you in getting this initiative off the ground. And I think it's very crucial that the right individuals, that you are open hearts, that God brings you the right individuals, because you have to have the right individuals on the core team to make this work. And you need diversity across the board, right? You need diversity, but I think it's just important that you have that core team right, because once you have the core team right, and you've got people that have the right hearts, the right intentions, right? And we don't all have to think alike. As a matter of fact, I don't want us all to think alike. I want us to all bring different schools of thought to the table. But I just want to stress, I think that is very important that you look at that core team as you're trying to advance these movements. Would you agree with that, Chuck?
Yes, I definitely would. I think my own summary here, which includes what you've shared and maybe just adding to it a little bit, lessons learned on my end. First of all, like John Maxwell loves to say, everything rises and falls with leadership. Building the right leadership team is really critical to build out a workplace leg. And these are people that need to have both that head for the workplace and that heart for ministry. They've got to be able to have the both and that's not a no-brainer. finding people that are just really street smart, but they just, if you cut their wrists, they would just bleed for the kingdom. These are special people. They're not run of the mill. So you really need to look for them. I would also say that there's a grafting process that takes place where I think in Columbus, for the congregations and nonprofits, the pace at which we've been moving is familiar to them. However, for people like Trina and me who come from the private sector, you'd be out of business if you moved that pace. So my point is, you have to be like almost bilingual and bimodal to learn how to shift gears between these very different cultures. The culture of the marketplace and what we think of as church and nonprofit, they're just different. I'm not saying one's better than the other. They're just different. And you have to learn how to waddle between both of them. I think that's critical. A third point that's just a good reminder for me, and many of us who come from the tradition of congregations and nonprofits, we might not realize this. In the world of workplace ministries, they are typically as siloed and territorial as local churches and denominations. So it is a real accomplishment just to get all the workplace ministries in a city, like talking to each other and gathering together, much less getting them organized and mobilized as a leg on a larger stool. And all of it boils down to relationships, trusting relationships.
Gee, Chuck, I thought you marketplace people had it all together. Hey, I'm going to put a small semicolon here. Part of our format is to kind of break out and talk about this for us a bit. Trina, I've already been really, really significantly triggered here by your word courage. I believe we're in a season where we need to really have increased courage, right? And you in the marketplace, sharing a witness, being more bold. People are needy. I think people are looking for hope. They're looking for, something that makes sense in their lives. So we're going to talk about this. Matt has a couple questions for us to go to breakouts. We'll do this for 10 or 12 minutes and then come back and kind of talk about it. What are we hearing? What are you learning today? So Matt, give us a couple questions to field as we go.
Yeah, I just put those questions in the chat actually, so everybody can see them, but it's real simple. Just what resonated with you from what Chuck and Trina were sharing, but then also just really asking the hard question, how might you better develop the workplace leg of that stool in your city? So, thinking of some real practical tangible ways. And then lastly, I will give you a reminder for the last 2 or so minutes to make sure to pray for one another and also pray for marketplace leaders in your city. And some of you might even be saying, I don't even know any marketplace leaders. So we can pray that the Lord will build some of those greater connections for you on that citywide level.